Good morning everyone, this is Coach Gerald coming in live from GMG Chess, the home of the world chess champion. Today, let's talk about chess endgame. It is the last stage of the game chess. It is important to study and master the endgame first, wherein you can learn a lot of patterns and technique. As Capablanca said, if you want to improve your chess, study chess endings before everything else. And openings and middle games must be studied in relation to endgame. As former world champion Karpov said, pawns not only create the sketch for the whole painting, but they are also the soil and foundation of any position. Without further ado, let's go now to our topic, the basic pawn endgames. In this first position, whoever move first, the result will be drawn. And the pattern applied to this position is opposition. Then if white to move king f3, then it is important to move to e6 because your plan is to make opposition. King f4, then king f6. Now the black makes an opposition. e5, king e6, or you remember that pattern. King e4, then one square backward, king e7. Then king f5, king f7. If king d5, then king d7. e6, king e7, king e5. Again, one square backward. e8. That is important because when white king moves to the left, d6, then you can make opposition at d8. If white move to f6, then you can make opposition at king f8. King d6, king d8, e7, king e8, king e6. I know that you know this position. And for those beginners who doesn't know this position, we call this stalemate, wherein black doesn't have available squares. Then the result will be drawn. Let's go now to the next one. In this position, as you can see, there are green marks wherein white can win if the white king can go either of the squares. But if white to move, white cannot go to the squares. If black turns to move, then white can win. Let's check. If king goes to the left side, king c7, then the white king goes to the right side. That is outflanking. Then king d8, then king d6. King c8, king e7, again outflanking. King c7, d5, king c8, d6, king b7, d7. Now white pawn will be promoted. King c7, then d8 queen. Now let's go to the other one. In this position, there are two boxes. Whoever comes to that square will be lost because we call that corresponding square. And whoever moves to that square last will win the game. This green one is for the white king and the red one that is for black king. Let's check. Now the king goes to f6, king b5, then king e7, the first one to attack the pawn. Then black needs to protect that d6 pawn, and the first one who go to the corresponding square, king e6, and the white is the one to come to the corresponding square last and win the pawn, also the game. King b6, he cannot maintain the protection to his pawn. King takes d6, this position is winning for white. King b7, king e7, king c7, d6, king c8, d7, king c7, then d8 queen. Let's proceed with this one. Earlier, only two corresponding squares, but this one, multifold. c7, that is for c5. c8, the corresponding square is d5. Then d8, the corresponding square is d6. King d5 force. He needs to maintain the protection to his pawn. King c8, black gets first the corresponding square, but later on you can see that white has a tempi. King d4, king d8, then king c4. Now the option for black is either go to c8 and c7, but again the corresponding square is c7 and c5 and c8 and d5. Now either of the two, then white can get a corresponding square. Now let's say king c8, king d5, king d8, then king d6, king c8, c7, king b7 force, king d7 force, king a7, then c8 rook, because queen is blunder, wherein black has no available square for the king. While promoting with rook gives black to move his king to b7. This position is winning for white. Let's go now to the next one. In this position, we apply the rule of the square, wherein if the king goes inside the square, whoever turns to move, the king can either stop or capture the pawn. b4, king f1 doesn't help because he cannot protect or support the pawn. King f4, b5, king e5, b6, king d6, king c7, b8 queen, king takes b8. This position is drawn. Let's go to the next one. This one is very interesting. We call this reti position. The idea is to chase two birds at once. Then the best move is king g7. Two purposes. First is to prevent the black pawn to queen, and the next one to support his pawn to queen. h4. King f6, again, two purposes: to prevent the opponent pawn and to support his pawn. King b6, preventing the white pawn to queen. Then king e5. This is the correct one, because if you want to support your pawn by king e6, then black can easily capture your pawn. If you want to prevent the black pawn by king f5, now you cannot prevent because the pawn will push to h3. This move has two purposes: to support your pawn by moving to king d6 or moving to f4 to prevent the black pawn. Then black chosen h3, then king d6. White support now his pawn to queen. h2, c7, h1 queen, c8 queen. You know that this position is drawn. Now let's go to sub-variation. Let's say black move king b6, immediately wants to capture the pawn. Again, the same move, king f6. Then h4, then king e5. We arrive exactly in the same position earlier. King takes c6, king f4, h3, king g3, h2, king takes h2, draw. Let's go now to this one. Another rule of the square. As you can see in the diagram, the pawn reaches the end square. Then one of them will either queen. Then if white turns to move or black, the same result will happen. King d4. Black wants to capture first the e pawn, next the a pawn, but it doesn't help. a5, then king takes e4, a6, king f4, even king d5 doesn't help because after a7, king c6, now white become queen. a7, king g4, a8 queen, h3, then king g1. This position is winning for white. Let's go now to the other variation. After a5, then king c5, black wants to prevent the a pawn from queening, but the e pawn now comes into play. King b5, e6, king takes a5. If king c6, then a6. Black king cannot stop one of them. e7, king b6, then e8 queen. This position is winning for white. Then let's go to the other one. Again, another rule of the square. But at this time, the black pawn reaches only the second rank. Means that the white king can capture both of them. Let's see. Now king a4. White king wants to capture the a pawn first, next the d pawn. d4, then king b3. That is forced. Otherwise, if you capture, now the d pawn will be promoted. First, you need to prevent this pawn. King f6. Otherwise, if a4, you can capture that pawn, then you are in the rule of the square, wherein you can prevent the d pawn from queening. If black moves d3, then king c3. If a4, then king takes d3, then c3, king c2. You are in the rule of the square. After king f6, then king c4, then a4. If king e5 protecting the the pawn, then g7. White pawn is promoted. After a4, king takes d4, then the king is in the rule of the square. a3, king c3, a2, king b2, a1 queen, then king takes a1. This position is winning for white. Let's go to the other one. This one is all about sugswang or reciprocal sugswang. Now, how can you prevent these three connected pass pawn from queening? The best move is king b1. Let's see all black possible moves. Now, if black moves b3, then king b2. It prevents the a pawn to move or the c pawn to move. Either of them can be captured. Then, if king moves to king h7, then f7. The f pawn is promoted. After king b1, if black played a3, then king a2. You remember this move. You must place your king in front of the pawn that moves. Then b3. Now if c3, then you go to b3. Now either of this pawn will be lost if moves. Then if king moves, then one of your pawn will either queen. b3, king takes a3, king f7, then h7. The h pawn will become queen. If black plays after king b1, c3, then king c2. The same apply in a3 move. Then a3, then king b3. The same variation we analyzed earlier. Then king h8, f7. Now the f pawn will be promoted. a2, king takes a2, king h7, then f8 queen. This position is winning for white. Let's go to the other one. This one is very challenging one because you need to calculate, analyze well to win this position. The first move is king d4, good move. But first, why not moving the f pawn immediately? The purpose of this move is to place the king later, the black king at a3, wherein it is under check from f8 square by queen. After king d4, if white played b5, then f4, b4, f5, b3, king c3, king a3. Now we come to the point that the king is placed on a3 square. f6, b2, f7, b1 queen. The black is the one to promote first, but it lost later. f8 queen check, then king a4 force. Otherwise, if goes to a2, that is checkmate at a8. Queen a8 check, king b5, then queen b8. Now the black queen is lost, and that is winning for white. If black play king b5 after king d4, planning to stop the f4, then king d5. preventing the black king to occupy the important c6 square. King a6, f4, king b7, f5, king c7, king e6, because if you move the pawn at f6, then the position is draw. King d7. This one is preventing the black king to occupy the d7 square. King d8, then king f7, preventing the black king to occupy at e8. If black can go to e8, the position is draw. b5, f6, b4, king g7, b3, f7, b2, then f8 queen with check. This position is winning for white. Let's go to the other one. This one is all about shouldering. The same idea applied in reti, wherein your plan is to attack the a pawn and at the same time preventing the black to occupy the important c7 square. Then the best move is king e6. But let's check if you focus only on capturing the a7 pawn, what will happen? If you focus only by king e7, then king c3, king d7, king d4, king c7, king d5, king b7, king d6, king takes a7, king c7. Now this position is drawn, wherein the white king cannot escape. Now after king e6, then king c3, king d5 shouldering, wherein you can attack the a pawn at two moves and at the same time preventing the black to occupy the c7 square. King b4, king c4, king b7, king c5, king takes a7, king c6. Now you see the difference. White gains a one move tempo. This move is white turn. Unlike earlier, this position is in black turns. Then after king b8, the a pawn will be promoted. King b6, a7, king c5, then a8 queen. This position is winning for white. Let's analyze another one. In this position, you can apply the breakthrough, wherein one of your pawns will be promoted. The best move is b6, or you remember this pattern. After b6, there are two pawns that capture the b6 pawn, but none of them is good for black. After c takes b6, then a6. The c pawn will be promoted. After b takes a6, then c6. If earlier b takes c5, then a takes b7. Then king g6, c7, king f6, then the c pawn become queen. Then the black king cannot stop the c pawn from queening. Then let's go back after b6. If a takes b6, then c6. Oh, you remember this pattern. Then b takes c6, a6. the A pawn will be promoted. And this position is winning for white. B5, A7, B4, then A8 queen. Now let's go to the last one. Connected pass pawn versus the outside pass pawn. The white plan is to give up the protected pass pawn in exchange for the outside pass pawn, wherein white can get a tempo by opposition. After king f3, the first move, then king e5, king g4, king f6. Black needs to protect his pawn. Then this is now the point, c6. King e6, black needs to prevent the white pawn from queening. King takes g5, king d6, king f6, then king takes c6, that is forced. Then white gets the opposition by moving to king e6. This position is winning for white. King b6, king d6, king b7, king c5, king a6, king c6, king a7, then king takes b5, king b7, king takes a4. This position is winning again for white. That's all for today. Thank you for watching. Have a nice day.